Fritz Saukel stands on the wooden platform, and his knees buckle so severely that two American soldiers must grip his shoulders. Over 5 million foreign workers passed through his sprawling forced labor program across the continent. He held total power. Yet before his own noose, the Grand Master of human lives cannot even stand on his own feet. Appointed in 1942, he methodically drained occupied Europe of its people to feed the German war effort. Stormtroopers tore men, women, and children from their homes, sending them to vanish into dark subterranean munitions factories. 5 million stolen lives. That staggering number easily exceeded the entire population of Ireland at the time. During the long trial, he desperately tried to play the reluctant clerk who fought for better camp conditions. But the documents proved his direct guilt, revealing how he personally planned the brutal raids and signed the deportation orders. His arrogant facade had already dissolved in the Nuremberg prison, where guards watched him pace through the sleepless nights. Now, inside the execution chamber, physical terror takes complete control of his failing body. His face turns ash white, and his hands shake so violently that the steel cuffs rattle against each other. He stammers disjointed, desperate words about his wife and children. He begs for a reprieve. You hear his panicked, erratic breathing cutting through the heavy air just before the trap door opens. The American guards have to physically support his arms and torso to keep him standing upright. 10 gallows, 3 wooden platforms. October 16, 1946. The scaffold where Saukel wept was erected inside the former Nuremberg prison gymnasium. The room measured exactly 10 by 30 meters. Overnight, the Allies transformed this mundane sporting hall into a conveyor belt of death. Master Sergeant John C. Woods stepped up to manage the process. He volunteered for the grim duty. He built the structures with cold, mechanical precision. Woods worked methodically, replacing the panic of the condemned with the quiet creak of heavy timber. The International Military Tribunal handed down 12 death sentences. Yet only 10 men actually reached the gym floor. Hermann Göring cheated the hangman. The disgraced commander swallowed cyanide in his cell just hours before dawn. Martin Bormann never appeared for his judgment. The court convicted the missing official in absentia. The remaining 10 had nowhere to hide. The architects of a fallen empire now faced the strict schedule of retribution. The tribunal granted no delays. No appeals mattered. Woods tested the heavy trapdoors one last time to ensure a flawless drop. Then the executioner prepared the thick hemp nooses. Julius Streicher violently twisted his shoulders to break free from the American guards. He locked his wild eyes onto the journalists and spat raw curses directly into their faces. While the first hangings followed the protocol of Sergeant Woods, Streicher turned his last seconds into a pure, hysterical breakdown. The wooden platform shook. He fought the escorts every single step of the way. For more than 2 decades, his only real weapon had been the printed page. Streicher published the anti-Semitic newspaper Der Stürmer from his headquarters in Nuremberg, constantly feeding the public mind with grotesque caricatures and paranoid theories. Every single week, up to 600,000 copies flooded the streets to justify the coming slaughter. He had used those printed words to saturate an entire nation with toxic fanaticism. Now the sharp echo of his hysterical scream bounced off the pale walls of the former prison gymnasium. Sergeant Woods stepped forward to forcefully drag the thick hemp noose over the struggling man's head. Streicher threw his head back and screamed, "Heil Hitler!" with all the remaining air in his lungs. Then he spat out the phrase, Purim Fest 1946, using the ancient Jewish holiday of deliverance as his ultimate insult. He promised the silent witnesses that the Bolsheviks would eventually hang every single one of them. The pure animosity radiated from his trembling body, while the executioners secured his legs with tight straps. He kept shouting his toxic predictions until the black hood finally smothered his face. The executioners quickly stepped back. The heavy lever moved. He vanished into the hatch. How does a man who legally justified the destruction of nations face the noose? He adjusts his collar. He straightens his jacket. Where Julius Streicher spat saliva, Wilhelm Frick maintained the icy calm of a desk lawyer. He served as the Reich Minister of the Interior, the author of systemic murder. In his final weeks, Frick showed no panic, no regret. He just organized his documents. The man who created laws stripping minorities of their civil rights remained strictly methodical. He drafted endless explanations of his career. He treated the death penalty as a simple administrative hurdle. In 1935, his decrees erased millions of citizenships. A stroke of his pen replaced the executioner's axe. Now, he simply sorted his folders. Morning arrived. Frick stepped out into the corridor. His face looked tired but entirely composed. He walked to the gallows with a measured, even pace. He moved exactly like a clerk attending a routine hearing. The prison chaplain found him completely empty. Frick cared nothing for heaven or hell. He only cared about proper protocol. He stood on the wooden platform. The trapdoor waited below. Frick gave a dry cough. It sounded like a magistrate opening a mundane court session. He delivered his statement in a flat, legalistic tone. No apologies. No recognition of the blood dripping from his decrees. He firmly believed his paperwork was completely lawful. The hangman secured the knot. The minister spoke exactly 4 words. A completely different reaction to the gallows came from the man who broke millions of lives across occupied Poland. The butcher of an entire state had suddenly become a zealous Catholic. He begged the heavens for mercy. He stood over the wooden trapdoor, shoulders dropped. His lips moved in a quiet whisper of a prayer. An American sergeant placed the heavy rope around his neck. Frank's hands trembled slightly. The night before, the dull clack of wooden rosary beads echoed through his solitary cell. He spent his last hours weeping with the prison chaplain. This was Hans Frank, the former Governor-General of Poland. He ruled the conquered lands from the ancient Wawel Castle in Krakow. His territory spanned over 140,000 square kilometers. 12 million people lived under his direct command. Frank systematically fed them to the firing squads. He proudly called his own domain a devil's playground. Now the power was gone. Fear easily replaced arrogance. The bloody dictator vanished. A humble Catholic stood on the scaffold, asking God for a merciful judgment. He thanked his captors for their fair treatment. The sudden contrast divided the observers. The prison chaplain formally validated his religious transformation as a genuine miracle. But the attending journalists recorded deep skepticism toward the convenient faith of a cornered killer. Hans Frank's tearful prayers would have provoked nothing but cold disgust in Ernst Kaltenbrunner. A man standing 1 meter 83 centimeters tall stepped onto the wooden platform. He inspected the heavy gallows exactly like a site manager accepting completed work from a construction contractor. His final night in the cell passed without tears or panic. Kaltenbrunner meticulously sorted his personal belongings into neat piles. He folded his clothes and stacked his final letters with precise geometric care. He processed his own impending death as just another mundane bureaucratic task requiring proper filing. He had applied this exact same pedantry to the destruction of Europe. As chief of the Reich Security Main Office, Kaltenbrunner commanded the entire domestic terror apparatus. The Gestapo network under his direct control numbered over 30,000 staff members. These clerks and officers made the final solution a highly efficient daily administrative routine. They processed human beings in the quotas, train schedules, and neat death certificates. Millions perished under his signature. He managed the genocide without ever raising his voice. The architect of mass murder simply approved official documents and filed them away. The executioners bound his hands. Kaltenbrunner maintained a chilling emotional detachment from the entire procedure. He stood rigidly under the heavy wooden beam. Other condemned men often shouted. He simply closed the project. He viewed the witnesses through the cold eyes of a professional administrator, finalizing a completed personnel file. The hangman adjusted the thick rope. Kaltenbrunner delivered his final statement in a flat, administrative tone. Can a commander authorize mass murder and still die an honorable man? For a Prussian officer, the answer was yes. Unlike Kaltenbrunner, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel did not hide behind civilian bureaucracy. He shielded himself with the military manual. He marched up the wooden steps. His pace was measured, a parade ground stride. The thick leather of his polished boots scraped sharply against the raw planks of the scaffold. He snapped to attention, back straight, chin up. He delivered his final words like a battlefield report. This rigid posture was a desperate illusion, a mental fortress against the truth. As chief of the high command, Keitel weaponized blind obedience. He signed the infamous Commissar Order in June 1941. That single document condemned hundreds of thousands of captured Soviet political officers to immediate execution. No tribunals, no prisoner rights, just summary slaughter. Yet he called it standard procedure. He stood proudly under the heavy beam. He claimed he only executed the directives of his superiors. History named this the Nuremberg defense. He felt no remorse. He offered no apologies. Instead, he justified his crimes through the blood of the front. 2 million German soldiers died. He declared he was simply following his men into the dark. It was the ultimate self-deception. A mass murderer playing the tragic hero. The executioner pulled the lever. The trapdoor shattered his perfect posture. General Alfred Jodl stepped onto those same wooden boards minutes later. He considered Keitel's reliance on military regulations primitive. The strategist who once cold-bloodedly plotted the collapse of entire nations was now calculating the exact intonation of his dying words. As chief of the operations staff of the Armed Forces High Command, his intellect had steered a continental war. He never hid behind ignorance. He justified the slaughter through tactics, through military necessity, through cold logic. In the weeks before the rope, Jodl turned his cell into an academic study. He drafted his historical testament, page after page of sophisticated arguments excusing atrocities. He worked with the exact same meticulous focus he once applied to invasion plans. On the morning of his execution, he did not look like a condemned prisoner. He walked to the gallows like a professor entering a university hall. His movements were measured, precise, unrushed. He took his position over the drop. He delivered his final statement with the precision of a frontline briefing. His calm, measured tone never wavered once during the speech. He spoke only of duty. He declared that future scholars would vindicate his impossible tactical choices. He used a brilliant intellect to sanitize mass destruction. He refused the guilt until the very end. The final letters he sent to his wife contained no remorse, only his firm belief that he was a martyr to political circumstance. Hundreds of thousands of dead civilians. That was his true legacy. This cold intellectual arrogance found its ultimate peak in the final man to face the rope. The guards brought out Arthur Seyss-Inquart. In his cell, he acted like a visiting scholar. He evaluated his own crimes with academic detachment. He wrote long political essays. He felt nothing. He felt pride. He engineered the bloody annexation of Austria. Then he took power as the Reich Commissioner of the Netherlands. He viewed human lives as mere statistics. Under his direct command, trains deported over 100,000 Jews from Dutch cities directly to the death camps. He walked into the execution chamber without fear. He maintained his professor's mask to the very end. He firmly believed future generations would vindicate his life's work. Decades later, history would instead record him exclusively as a ruthless mass murderer. He stood tall. He faced the witnesses. He started his final righteous defense. The lever shifted. The trap door slammed open. The rope snapped. His speech abruptly broke off. Heavy iron doors slammed shut. A sharp metallic clang. Men who once believed they owned Europe were now nothing but coarse gray dust. Workers silently swept the remains into unmarked containers. By 3 in the morning, the guards had cut the last ropes. The hanging of Seyss-Inquart and the other 9 condemned men finished at 2:45 on October 16, 1946. Convoy trucks rolled through the dark streets. Inside sat cheap, nameless urns. Just months prior, millions marched to the bark of these leaders. Now, the creators of the Holocaust were reduced to anonymous dirt. The Allies left no room for martyrs, no graves, no monuments, No future shrines for fanatic pilgrims. Soldiers opened the metal lids. They tilted the containers over the black water. The freezing current of the Isar River caught the falling ash. It swallowed the gray dust instantly. Their physical bodies vanished forever. The men were erased. Their actions were immortalized. The tribunal documented every brutal order and every fatal signature. The charge of crimes against humanity evolved from abstract theory into a lethal weapon of justice. The world forged a new reality. Blind obedience no longer protected anyone from the gallows. The ashes dissolved in the dark tide, but the legal hammer they forced into existence struck the globe. The United Nations cemented the Nuremberg principles as binding international law in the year 1950.